Hey everyone, welcome to part 27 in this FXS Lowrider restoration series. If you're first joining us, you could click on this link in the top right corner. It'll take you to a listing of all the videos. You could click on the first link or whatever link you left off from and continue from there. In our last video, we installed the starter, associated hardware, as well as the solenoid. Torqued down the clutch basket as well as the front pulley. And after one more cleaning, loaded up our clutch and friction plates back into the basket, followed by the cleanup and installation of our pressure plate, which we just loosely locked in with the nuts to bring us to this chapter. In this video, we're going to set up the clutch, install the oil pan, all of the oil hoses, some basic cabling that's required before the battery bracket goes in. We're going to clean up the battery bracket at the shop and then install that. Let's get started. This is a 5-stud clutch hub. Some people say they're harder or easier to set up than the 3. I'm indifferent. Each has their advantages or disadvantages, but the technique is the same. I'll start with the removal of these 2 washers that I use as a locking tool, and I held these washers together with the locking nut, which I'll loosen now to remove those washers. With those washers removed, I'll put that locking nut right back on. It's those 5 nuts that hold everything together, no longer needing those washers anymore. I'll store these away. An old Shovelhead valve guide makes a good locking tool as well. Now I want to bring that locking nut all the way in on the clutch cable adjustment so that I could turn that clutch cable adjuster clockwise, bringing it in, not as far as it could go, but a good deal, so I have a lot to work with. We see here I've ensured a significant amount of slack on the cable. I've set up my calipers for 1 1/32 of an inch, and after eyeballing the initial turns, I'm now looking with the calipers as I make adjustments on the individual screws to check the clearance from the end of the lip all the way to the plate to see which ones need adjusting. And I'm just going through, and there's slots on these screws for adjustments of half a turn. So I'm going around and I'm just trying to get this even. At this time I want to make sure that my lock nut is sufficiently loose. I'm doing a demonstration here of the adjustment screw. As I turn it clockwise, we could see the arm on the clutch engagement turn back, also demonstrating how if you don't slacken the clutch cable enough, how the clutch handle could actually stop the adjustment. I've set my calipers to 13/16 of an inch or 0.812 thousandths of an inch to measure out this cable tie, which I'm now using to measure the distance between the top of this transmission and that arm. Pushing the arm towards the transmission to remove the slack, I'm turning that screw on the center of the clutch hub to get the exact distance and clearance as set on that piece of cable tie. Now I'll start turning the adjuster for the clutch cable in the other direction, removing slack from the clutch cable. Not all of it though, just most of it. I'll set 2 nickels in between the clutch handle and hold it closed, and then continue tightening the adjuster until I feel resistance, knowing that the handle has closed on the 2 nickels. Then I'll depress the handle so the nickels fall out. This will ensure that there's always a little bit of slack on the handle so we're not always riding on the clutch. And I'll tighten down that locking screw. Do one more inspection right quick for clearance. It looks good. Now I'll do a quick mechanical test. So I'm going to hold that adjustment screw with the flathead while I tighten that locking nut with the box end of a wrench. Just give it a little nudge, doesn't take much. Recheck my work one more time. We can see from this angle everything working in unison, it pulling and the plate pushing out evenly. And I'll check once more from this side, provides for a better view. And if our adjustments are correct, not only do we have a little slop on the clutch handle, but we also have a little slop here on the arm. We can see right now it's engaged and I cannot turn. And now I've depressed the clutch and it turns without issue. And now I let go, again re-engaged. Now I could turn without issue, again re-engaged, everything's working real nice. Using a 1/2 inch and a 9/16, I'll lock down the nut, which locks down the clutch cable adjustment, completing this portion of the project. We're moving on to the oil pan now. We haven't seen this in like a couple of years. This is the one that Jason welded over here, the tab that had broken off in video 2. This was removed. I have washed this out for preparation for installation. I'm using a new hose for this bottom connection of the pan. So I'm going to connect that now. This hose has to be connected before you install it because it's just really hard to reach. So we're just going to slide this on, and I'm just going to take a hose clamp and just tighten it down, and that's going to be the only pre-preparation done for this. I'd inspected and cleaned all the connections on the ignition switch and then taped everything back up. This included all the mounting pieces as well. As long as all the rubber mounts are removed, the oil pan is easy to install just like this. It constantly gets caught on little cables though, so I'm always checking to see that the cables aren't getting stuck and removing them as they do. Just pushing it into position from this side until it bumps up against where the mounts would be in the back. From the other side, I pull it through significantly further just to clear both sides of those two mounts. On the other side of the mounts, it's done. It's in, and you can see why I left that tape down there. Come back and inspect this side now and get this oil line out of the way of the starter power cable. Evaluate all the other cables, make sure nothing's stuck or crimped or out of place. But I'm looking, everything looks good. Here's one of the two original rubber mounts. Here's the replacement for it. This one will just screw in first like this. It's a dissimilar metal though, so I want to put just a little bit of anti-seize on there. Just work it in, threads. As I screw it on, I'm going to turn it on and off just a couple of times to work it in the threads. Make sure the anti-seize is evenly distributed before tightening it down. And this just slides over the mount like that. Then I'll prepare the next one for the front mount. Same process. And this will have to go through the oil tank first to make room. With it in the oil tank, I'm using 2 fingers to sort of turn it. There's not a whole lot of room to work here, but I'm turning it so it threads into the frame. If you try and just put it in the frame first, the tank will bump into the shift linkage. And there it goes, it's tightened down. Now the tank could slide on. Of course, this is more resting than mounted. We can see that because the battery tray is missing, it provides the other half of the mounts there and there. And that's fine, there's still stuff to do. I need to move this out of the way because the ignition switch is going to have to come under here while we're still able to move this out of the way. We're going to have trouble later. So here it is now under. We'll put this tank back onto the mount. And this is where it'll sit. Now I can put the ignition switch mounting hardware back on. Now the chrome cap. And this seats through that stud from the mount. Now we're going to put on a washer and a nut. Not fully tightened, but this is how the ignition switch mounts. The front mount will also get a washer. Then we'll put a nylock nut on there. Again, we're not going to fully tighten it down right now. We're just going to get it on. A couple turns to hold it, stop it from falling off. We have 3 pieces for the oil tank. This is the cap that goes on the filter. It really needs to be cleaned well. A lot of crap gets under here. I've done significant amount of cleaning to ensure that there's nothing left inside this cap. Then I've oiled the cork. See, here's my magnetic drain plug and washer. Very strong magnet indeed. Should be very good on break-in too. If any metal shavings get by, it'll catch them. This one's always been a bit tough, so I have to hit it with a wrench here just to get through a couple threads. But it's always been that way, so whatever. I'm not going to torque it tight since the pan's not mounted. Here's the oil filter cap. Just thrown it on here to stop any foreign matter from getting into this oil pan. And finally, the fill cap / thermostat thrown in to stop any debris from getting in. We're going to add all the connections that need to be done before the battery tray goes in. We're going to start with the starter power, removing that label. We're going to put it right on the stud on that starter, first removing the hardware. Given the size of the eyelet, I'm going to put a leading and trailing washer onto the stud. and drop that eyelet on there. The original shape of the cable, and looking at the old videos, shows exactly how this cable is supposed to be placed in as to not interfere with the clutch or the battery tray. I know it's in the right spot. And put that hardware back on with the lock washer, and then finally the nut. The nut on this particular starter tightens down with a metric 10mm, ensuring as I tighten down that the cable remains pointing straight upward. We can see that the shape of this cable in this position doesn't interfere with the clutch, nor does it interfere with the battery tray. Here's the cables for the rear brake light switch. I'm going to plug those in now. I'll tie it up to the frame right here for now. If it looks good when the battery tray goes in, I'll leave it here. If not, I'll readjust as necessary. I'm going to connect this oil low pressure switch as well as the neutral switch for the transmission, and no doubt they'll probably be disconnected before long as the oil hoses go in. But that's okay. I just want to make sure everything's fitting right. This nut in the oil pressure switch will be snugged down with a 3/8. Pulling up the slack. Everything looks good, so I'm just going to leave these right there. This is the area of the frame that I had welded shut and re-tapped. It had an old rubber mount on there. Swapping it out for a new one, as all of them are going to be replaced on this bike. This wire connects to a relay on the battery tray, so it actually goes in last. Up here I've got battery negative, battery positive off the breaker, and battery positive. Now we come to the first of the oil hoses, number 1. We could see it being marked in one of the earlier videos. We're going to install it now. This hose has been cleaned and inspected, going right back into its original position. And we'll tighten this side down. As I rip off the old label, not only do I consult with the manual, obviously, for how to connect the hoses, but I also refer to how I connected it previously to ensure that it was connected correctly in the first place.
One comes here to the front of the oil bag.
Having verified the correct location of hose number 1, I plug it in to that vent connection right here. Push up that hose clamp into position. And be sure to tighten it on a high enough angle that the bottom of the clamp doesn't interfere with the hose for the return of the oil line yet to be installed by the cap. Here, using a small piece of hose demonstrates that clearance, that it's not going to rub against that hose with vibration or obstruct it in any way. I'm going to take a minute to reintroduce the oil pressure gauge. It's pipe thread, so I'm going to give it a couple of wraps with Teflon tape. This is a visible item, so I'm going to clean up that tape by scoring it at the base with the razor blade. Then I'm going to peel off all the excess that remains and give it a couple of twists. I'm going to hand tighten it in to the appropriate depth. Then give it that one last turn with a 7/16 wrench. Also using it to set the final viewing position that I wanted on the bike. And the gauge is in. Moving on. Next will be the send from the bottom of the tank. So I'm going to remove this paper towel covering on the oil pump. And here's that hose that I had put on the tank before installation. I'd cut it to a shorter length, but now we're going to cut it to size. A new razor blade with a slight bend of the hose always makes a clean cut in these type of hoses. This looks like a good fit. So we'll just drop in another hose clamp, and we're just going to put this hose right onto the pump. It is the outer fitting for the send. Bring that hose clamp down, and then we'll just tighten it down. The thermostat will go in now, paying care to the direction that it's going to be installed. There's an inlet and an outlet for this. I'm going to turn these hoses and bend them a certain way so it fits like it did on the frame before. I had it just right. Drop a cable tie right down the middle, and this will hold it onto the frame. Then I could start securing the hoses. Put a piece of paper towel in this line on the high side as I route it up through the frame towards the tank. Weaving around, I make my way to the top. And I'll be connecting this one here as I remove the paper towel. And then that piece of tape indicating the number from the deinstallation. And I'll drop on a hose clamp. And I'll set this up to tighten it down. And I've situated the clamp so that when I tighten it down, the bottom of the clamp is not touching the tank, so it won't vibrate. Small test hose shows on the low side where it comes up in the frame. We can see it comes up right over here by the transmission. Here's the hose from the thermostat. Already has a bend to it, wrapping around the transmission. Pull this paper towel from the oil pump and the hose. It became clear very quickly that the outer hose was going to have to come off in order to get this inner hose on easily. And we could see with that done, everything turned out really nice. Onto the battery tray. The battery tray is going to be disassembled and then sandblasted so that it can be powder coated. Take out that rubber mat. Also have this broken mount, as well as this relay. I have to ensure that all the old paint is removed with the sandblasting as to have good adhesion with the powder coating. An inspection shows everything to be ready. This is a mixture of flat with a little bit of gloss to make it look like a satin, just like original. Pop it in the oven. Let it cool down. And this piece came out absolutely perfect. Looks just like original stock, ready to go back on the bike. I'll remove this rubber mount I've been storing here. As a quick demonstration, onto the mount and behind the two bolts, we can see how this fits in, just like that. But this bracket's going to have to come off yet again so we can fit that last mount on. So we have this little bolt for the back of the starter. And these two for the tranny cover, and these have the Nord locks on them. So we're just going to slide this bracket right off. And I'm going to place the rubber mount on the bracket. I'm going to use a nylock nut for this rubber mount. The nylock snug down should hold it sufficiently. Next, I'm going to tighten down the relay on the bracket on the other side. I'm using some blue Loctite on this nut to hold it in place. Tightening that, making sure it's straight. And everything is now set up for installation. So, in the back rubber mount, the bolts in the back on the oil pan, it drops into place, and it's in. Quick check, mount. Relay, mount, bolt and bolt. I now reintroduce that bracket, which also goes over the mount which has been added. All the nuts that have been removed are now going to be put back on the different areas of this bracket. This includes the Nord locks. And then the rear mount. While holding the oil pan up in position, the two bolts will be tightened down with a 1/2 inch. Then the rear mount will be snugged, followed by the lower mount. and then the starter mount. The 2 bolts on the kicker cover will be retorqued to 190 inch-pounds. The rear mount on the low side will be snugged down, followed by the front lower mount on the low side. Now the oil drain can be securely tightened. And that's it. That's a clutch setup and complete oil system installation on this FXS Lowrider. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Hit that like button down below. Helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. When the next video comes out, a link will be posted in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?